How you feeling? You got John Riggs here, and when the NES came out in the mid-80s, yes, they were making new games for it, of course they were, but there was already this huge archive of games for the arcade, for previous consoles that were already tried and true, already proven successful, so to help boost the NES at its launch, you know, why not re-release some of these games to have them maybe be a little bit more arcade style, a little bit more arcade friendly, maybe a little bit closer to the arcade than some previous consoles, especially the Atari 2600. In this video, I'm going to showcase 18 Nintendo games that were also on the Atari 2600, and that's not even all of them, but here's 18 of them in this video. Before we get to the video, big time shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you so much for making this video possible. Couldn't have done it without you. Consider being a patron today. Well, to get right to it, gotta start off with Pac-Man, which did come out for the NES. Couple of versions. This is the Namco version. There was also a Tengen version. I think the Namco one plays pretty well, though. Looks pretty arcade accurate. It's not 100% one-to-one ratio with the arcade, but it's good. Compared to the travesty that we got for the Atari 2600... Oh dear lord, I'm old enough to remember when my dad went to the store to get our first Atari 2600. It had to have been 1982 or so. And I remember thinking to myself, I can play Pac-Man at home, don't need quarters or anything. And then this is what we got. I actually still enjoyed this game. I mean, it was still pretty much Pac-Man, just not exactly what I had in mind. According to the gaming historian, this was just the prototype what was going to be Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, but they went ahead and printed the prototype. You can check out his video for more information on that. Hard to have Pac-Man without Miss Pac-Man, the superior version of Pac-Man to most people's eyes, including my own. And this is the NES version. It's Miss Pac-Man, alright. Differences compared to Pac-Man is the fruit bounces around instead of being static in the middle of the screen. The ghosts may or may not have different behaviors. I never figured out the behaviors of the different ghosts, or monsters according to the old school Pac-Man archives. The Atari 2600 version of Miss Pac-Man actually plays really well. This is a very decent port, especially for its time. I have no problems with this game. I mean, it's not, again, arcade accurate, but it's a lot closer to the arcade version than what we saw for Pac-Man for the 2600. Kind of funny to think that back in the day, Nintendo was making games for Atari, and of course there was Donkey Kong. Now this is Donkey Kong for the NES. Again, not arcade accurate, but it was close enough that we just kind of said, like, yeah, that's good enough, we'll allow it. So you got Mario jumping over the barrels, trying to rescue Pauline from Donkey Kong. The arcade version had 4 levels, this one had 3, and that was okay. And then you have the Atari 2600 version of Donkey Kong, where you have the gingerbread man throwing a honeycomb at you. And I played a lot of this when I was growing up. I mean, it was still Donkey Kong enough that it got the job done. The arcade version had 4 levels, the NES version had 3 levels, this one had 2 levels. This level here with the pegs, those fire things never move up the ladders, they just kind of roam left and right. But still, I mean, not bad. What about another classic, Donkey Kong Jr., the game where Mario plays the bad guy. You're Donkey Kong Jr. trying to rescue your dad, Donkey Kong. Should be able the vines and avoid the bad guys, of course. The Atari 2600 version of Donkey Kong Jr., though, well, I mean, it looked like this. I mean, if you use your imagination, I guess, it gets the job done. But, you know. And then this one only had the 2 stages, including the one with the keys. And I guess according to lore, yeah, Donkey Kong Jr. for the Atari 2600, who would have thunk it? Continuing the trend, we have Mario Brothers. This is before Super Mario Brothers. You have Mario in his plumbing roots, knocking over the bad guys, gotta kick them off the edge of the screen. Fun game, this one. Two-player funness on this with Mario Brothers. And the Atari 2600 version of Mario Brothers isn't actually all that bad. It actually plays pretty well, all things considered. You know, coins aside, whatever those flashing cubes are, I mean, it gets the point across. You know what's going on, you can tell what's going on, especially if you're a fan of the series like I was. Yeah, nothing to do. Yeah, nothing to worry about. Even had the bonus stages with actual coin-shaped coins. Why couldn't we get those for the items that were coming out? Well, I don't know. Don't worry about it. Another one of my all-time favorites, Popeye. This is the NES version here. You gotta catch the hearts from olive oil, like music notes in different stages, or whatever she's tossing out, you gotta pick them up. Avoid Bluto. You do have your can of spinach that will give you, that you can use once per round. That will get them off the screen and, you know, kind of get you the upper hand here. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Popeye. And the Atari 2600 version of Popeye, again, it gets the job done. Doesn't look bad. I played a lot of this when I was growing up too. In fact, the Atari 2600 version, unlike the NES version, has the bottles being thrown out of the side. Now in the arcade, it's the Sea Hag who's tossing bottles at you every once in a while from behind the steps, which she doesn't do in the Nintendo version. You don't see the Sea Hag, but you know they're tossing out all the same, and you can punch them out of the way. This one has 2 stages. Alright, I'm going to slightly cheat on this one because this is Dig Dug, and this is the Famicom version. It did not come out in America for the NES, but it did come out for the Famicom, and it plays like Dig Dug. I'm a huge fan of Dig Dug. Old school arcade game, you gotta dig, and then you use your pump to inflate these enemies until they explode. And the Atari 2600 version, like the other ones, it gets the job done. You can kind of tell what's going on. Instead of rocks, you have these little cube square things, but you know what they're supposed to be. You can tell who the enemies are supposed to be just by looking at them. Yeah, it's not bad. Now, HAL America made a series for the NES that were available on both the NES and, of course, ported over from the arcade version, which also had Atari ports. This is Defender 2. You're defending the planet from the aliens, trying to capture the citizens, I suppose. Fast-moving action, huge lasers. Kind of a classic space shooter, that horizontal action. And the Atari version, very similar. Very similar, actually. Alright, Defender 2. Another all-time favorite in Joust. Now, if you're not familiar with Joust, but you are familiar with the NES and Balloon Fight, well, odd to say that this plays like Balloon Fight, because I'm so used to saying Balloon Fight plays like Joust. You gotta pop the enemies, grab their eggs. If you don't, then, another rider will pop out and, hop on another ostrich. I guess they're ostriches? Super fun game. Well, I'm a huge fan of Joust. And I played a lot of it for the Atari 2600 as well. Here's the Atari version. Like I said, it gets the job done. You can tell what's going on. No Centipede, but we have Millipede, which is kind of the sequel, I suppose. And it plays basically the same. This one has DDT, though, which is like little bombs, basically, to destroy more parts of your Centipede, or Millipede in this case. I'm a huge fan of this game. Would be better with a trackball, but, with the joystick or with the controller works just fine. And then with your joystick on the Atari 2600, it plays just fine, too. Instead of DDT, you just have DT. That's how it'll fit. But you know what it's supposed to be. Millipede for the 2600. Because sure. Another all-time favorite in burger time. Your Peter Pepper, making the most giantest burgers you've ever seen in your life, which are pretty basic on this first level. It's bun, meat, lettuce, and then another bun. No cheese or anything. Come on. Gotta have that cheeseburger, right? And then in the Atari 2600 version, it's similar. It's almost like you're starting on stage 2. And interesting that when you drop the burgers down, like everything looks kind of the same until they're down in their platforms. And that's when they kind of take the shape or color of what you're making. Bump and Jump, another classic here. It's a driving game that looks like this, and there was a few of them for the time. But the gimmick on this one is if you go fast enough, you can jump. So you got to jump over like the waterways and bridges and whatnot, and you have to bump the enemies into the sides of the road to make them blow up. Hence the name Bump and Jump. Very, very decent port for the Atari 2600. And you can certainly tell what's going on. I like the fact that your wheels are kind of wiggling a little bit to give the simulation that the arcade version was giving you. Like they're gonna fall off the axle or something. Yeah, Bump and Jump for the 2600, not bad. Kind of into the realm of like, what, they made that for the 2600? Well, they did. Well, we have Double Dragon, one of the first, probably more mainstream beat-em-ups. There have been other beat-em-ups along the way, but this one was the one that I think kind of took the world by storm for a while there. So you got Double Dragon. And then the 2600, it's pretty rough, to be honest with you. But they made one, and people bought it, apparently. Double Dragon for the 2600, who knew? Ikari Warriors, along that same line too. Kind of top-down war shooter, going through, throwing grenades, shooting bad guys. And on the 2600, it's like everything's kind of bigger, but it still kind of gets the job done. You can see what's going on. They even have the tanks in this one. Crazy. Good old Xenophobe. I want to like this game. I really do. It's rough to control. There's too many things going on. But cool game. And in the arcade, much better, because you can do 3-player. They're all going their own ways. You all get your own screen. 2 screens on the NES version. And then even with the Atari 2600 version, it's not terrible. I mean, you can still tell what things are. You can still where you're going. It's just you just move from room to room and kill the bad guys and pick up the items. And, try to blow up the ship and leave on time. All right. Yeah, they made Xenophobe, or Xenophobe, I suppose, for the 2600. Classic black box game for the NES. Just go through the level and kick or punch the bad guys before they gang up on you. All right. And similar story for the 2600 version. Just same thing. It's a little bit harder to maneuver because you only have the one button. So your one button's attack, and then you have to do something to make you jump. So a little harder to control on this one, but it did exist. On the 2600, it's called Kung Fu Masters. So if you're looking for it, it'll be under Kung Fu Masters. Another classic, Rampage. Play the giant monsters, knock down the buildings. Love me some Rampage. A lot of fun on this one. And the 2600 version, which will let you play as Ralph. The NES version didn't let you do that. Again, like, thanks for trying. Pretty rough, but you can kind of tell what's going on as far as like buildings and where you're punching to make them disintegrate. But yeah, there is a they do have Rampage for the 2600, believe it or not. Now this one just makes sense because it's Klax, and Klax is made by Atari, so the Tengen version of Klax, it's a fun puzzle game. These tiles come down, you can collect a few of them or drop them down and get 3 in a row, and it'll clear them out. But sometimes you have to get like 3 in a row, like in an X, or 3 in a row horizontally or vertically, and you just have to keep going and going and going. You can even toss your tiles back up the screen or up the ramp if you need some extra time to figure out what you're going to do with that thing. So you can check out Klax for the NES, or even check out Klax for the 2600. And from what I understand, this was one of the last, maybe the last officially licensed game that came out for the 2600. I think this was maybe PAL territory, is that right? 1990 of all years? Good lord. But yeah, they made a version of Klax for the 2600, and it plays just like Klax. Klax is one of those games you don't need good graphics. You just need to have fun gameplay, and Klax will do that for you. And I know I'm leaving games off this list. There's a couple of them that as I've recorded this, I'm not going to say what they are, but I'll see if you can guess what they are, but I'm sure there's even more than that too. So let me know in the comments below any games that were on both Atari and the NES, and I'd love to hear from you, and maybe we'll do a round 2 or something like that sometime down the line. And in the meantime, I thank you for watching, and consider subscribing, and we'll see you very soon.